Great to be with you guys today. Let me begin with a question this morning. Maybe this will wake some of you up. How many of you have ever lost something? Raise your hand. Let me see a show of hands this morning. Okay, just about all of us have, right? I'll never forget, several years ago, we had a DVD player that went out. And of course, we now live in a disposable society. When something breaks, you don't fix it, you just buy something to replace it. And so I went down to the local Walmart. I found the cheapest DVD player that I could find. I bought it, brought it home, and I'll tell you, it worked great. I mean, it played our videos just fine. But then a couple of weeks later, our family misplaced the remote. Now, did I mention that this was a cheap DVD player? Because in my mind, I thought, okay, well, this is no big deal. I'm not lazy. I mean, I can get up and I can push the buttons on the DVD player to make this thing work. And when I got up there to push the buttons, there were no buttons to push. And you had to have the remote to work some of the functions. And so, man, I was just like, are you kidding me? This is crazy. And so I start this search. I mean, I'm looking everywhere throughout the house, all in the living room, searching for this remote control for the DVD player. And I got so frustrated that I called in my family and I said, look, the remote is missing. You guys are going to have to help me out. And so I gave them designated areas where they were to look, but we all went out and we all began to search. Question number 2. And I don't want to see a show of hands, but how many of you would compare this to life? You say, well, what exactly do you mean? Well, it's almost like life at times is this great big search, right? Where we know that there is something out there, somewhere that we are missing. And maybe for some of us, we don't even know what that is. But we feel this void in our life, and we feel like it's too important for us to overlook. I mean, we feel it within our heart that there is something that's just not right, that there is something that is missing that we need to find. Look with me to the book of Ecclesiastes this morning. If you didn't bring your Bible with you, that's okay. We've got a Bible in the pew. If you're looking for Ecclesiastes, try page number 539. That should be chapter 1. Our Bibles are all the same in the pew. 539. I believe that's right. For those of you who are looking there, if I'm wrong, go to the table of contents and you can find it. For those of you who are not familiar with the book of Ecclesiastes, basically what you're looking at is a journal. It's a journal written by a king by the name of Solomon. And what he does in this journal is he writes down all these different paths that he went through in pursuit of meaning, in pursuit of the purpose of life. And every one of those roads, every one of those paths that he went down, and what's interesting is many of us go down these same paths today, but every single road, every single path he went down trying to find happiness, trying to find meaning, trying to find purpose, every single one of them turned up void. In fact, if you look at verse 2, you began to sense Solomon's frustration. This is what he says in the very beginning of his journal. He says, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. That's how Solomon refers to himself. Utterly meaningless. Everything is what, church? Meaningless. Wow. I mean, Solomon is no holds bar, right? He says, I've gone down all these paths, and he says, this is my conclusion. I've seen it all, I've done it all, I've heard it all, and he says the only way to describe it is what? Meaningless. Now you have to understand this about King Solomon. King Solomon was probably the richest man to ever walk the face of this earth. He was probably the most powerful man at his time. And so you think about this. This was a guy who could have anything that he desired, anything that he wanted. And he basically began to experiment with all these different things. And he's journaling what he finds. I tried women. I tried relationships. I tried wealth. I had all these things. I tried entertainment, from music to dancing. I tried wine. I tried all these different things. And at the end of every single one of these journeys, he says, you know what? This was my discovery. He says it was meaningless. Now, here's the question. Has things changed from then till now? I tell you what, let's do a little experiment. Let's notice some of the things that Solomon says here. First of all, number one, he says, life feels tiring. Look at verses 3 through 8. This is how he describes it. He says, what does man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets. And then it hurries back to where it rises again. The wind blows from the south and then it turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, and yet the sea is never full. The place the stream comes from, there they return again. And all these things are wearisome, more than one can say. How many of you feel like this? How many of you would just say that, man, there are times where when you just think about your life, you say, man, I'm tired. I mean, how many of you would say, man, I get this because I go to work every single day and I work hard and I work hard and I work hard. But, there are times when I come home and I'm just like, man, what am I doing all this for? Where's it getting me? And we feel like we're not getting anywhere, man, we start to feel tired, don't we? And you know what? This is not an individual thing, really. I mean, this is how most people feel. In fact, Business Week magazine did a survey. They asked this question. They said, how do you feel? Guess what the number one answer was that Americans answered? I feel so tired. How many of you feel that way? Man, I'm tired. I work, and what am I gaining from it? And I love the illustrations that Solomon uses here. He talks about the rotation of the earth. The rotation of the earth, it just keeps going round and round and round. And he talks about, the weather patterns, and you guys understand this, right? You have summer, you have fall, you have winter, and then we have spring, and then guess what? All that starts back over again, right? It's just this cycle. And how many of us would say, man, that's how life feels? I mean, it feels like I'm on this treadmill. I'm going fast and I've got sweat to show for it and I'm working hard, but I got to tell you, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. There was an article in Men's Health magazine and it talked about long distance runners and how they can actually run farther outside than they can on a treadmill inside. Now, I would think that it would be just the opposite, right? Because on a treadmill, you can control your environment. I can turn the air down. I can keep things cool. I'm not out in the hot sun. And I can turn on the television kind of to distract me a little bit, and I can keep my water, up there where I can grab it anytime I want. And, they say treadmills are much better on your joints. But even after all that, what they have found is that long-distance runners run farther outside than they do on a treadmill. Why? It's psychological. When they're running outside, they feel like they're getting somewhere. But how oftentimes do we in life, we're working and we're going at this fast pace, but we would admittedly say, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. It seems like I'm giving it everything I got from Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday, and then, Sunday comes and I get a day off, and then it all starts back over again on Monday. We say, I feel tired, and Solomon says that's a symptom of not living for the right thing. Something else, as Solomon mentions, is life feels unsatisfying when you don't know what you're living for. Look at verses 8 through 10 now. Notice what he says. No matter how much we see, we are never what, church? Satisfied. No matter how much we have, we are never what? Content. History merely repeats itself. Now understand, Solomon is writing this before the internet was ever created. Solomon is writing this before there were iPods and iPads and Xboxes and all these things, satellite TV. Y'all tell me if you've ever experienced this. You go to your house, you've got DirecTV, 1,000 channels, and you flip 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 and you flip, and you go through all these channels, and finally you're scratching your head and you go, well, there's nothing on. Anybody relate to that? And so you get up, and what do? Well, you go over to the computer, and you sit there at your computer, and you're surfing the internet, and you surf for 30 minutes, maybe you search for an hour, and then after about an hour, you're scratching your head, and you're thinking to yourself, what have I just done? What a waste. But here's the thing, guys, our eyes, think about this, have never been offered more. Our ears have never been offered more, but yet we are still hungry at the end of the day, aren't we? We're not satisfied. And one of the reasons why we're not satisfied is many times we're pulling up to the wrong buffet. We're pulling up to the television. We're pulling up to whatever entertainment we can find. We're pulling up to this relationship and that relationship, and we're seeking out satisfaction, and we just can't find any. Life feels unsatisfying when you're pursuing the wrong thing. Solomon also says that life can feel pointless. Look at verse 11. Notice what it says. There is no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who are followed. In other words, what Solomon is saying is, you know what? We work so hard at leaving a mark on this earth, don't we? Just, being remembered, leaving a legacy that is going to last forever, where people will remember us and the things that we have done. But Solomon says it always comes up short. It doesn't work out that way. In fact, let me do an experiment this morning. How many of you can remember the names of your great-grandparents? Raise your hands. Look around. Not very many people. Watch it get a little bit thinner right here. How many of you know the names of your great-great-grandparents? Raise your hand. Now look around. And the point I'm trying to make is, guess what? That's just a few generations removed, and we don't even remember who these people are. This is our great-grandparents. This is our great-great-grandparents. Are you kidding me? And we don't even know their names. And Solomon says that's the way life is. Life can be unsatisfying. It can be tiring. Life can feel pointless. Aren't you glad you came to services today? Aren't you glad you're here? Some of you are going, man, I am so glad I've never studied the book of Ecclesiastes. And I don't know that I ever will. Stay with me though, okay? Because really, here is what Solomon is wanting every one of us to get. I mean, I know this starts off pessimistic, but what he's trying to get across is, listen, there is a need for something more in our lives. Are you with me? There's a need for something more than all this that we are trying to fill our lives with here on this earth. We begin to realize there's something missing. And you know what? That's good. Because you know what that stirs us to do? It stirs us to search. Or at least it should. You know, there are some people, you know, they see their life as tiring, wearisome, pointless, unsatisfying, and they look around and they begin to think to themselves, well, you know what? This is just normal. This is just the way life is. Hear me out, because here's what Solomon is trying to say to you and me. No, it's not. Are you kidding me? That is not how you were created to live. If you feel that way, then there is something missing. And it's not anything you'll find here. Now, you may not know you're missing it because you've never had it. But I'm telling you, it's missing. I'll never forget when I was probably in elementary school, my sister had a boyfriend by the name of David. And one of the things that David drilled into my head was real men do not eat quiche. And so every time I was offered quiche, I wouldn't eat it. He said, real men don't eat quiche. In fact, he said, you think about it. Where do they serve quiche? At these tea rooms for ladies. And he said, so men who eat quiche, they're very feminine. And so he said, you don't eat quiche. I'm like, well, I'm a real man. I don't eat quiche. So I didn't for years. I get into my high school years. My mom makes quiche. Now look at it and I said, what is this? She says, quiche. I said, Mom, I don't eat quiche. She said, have you ever tried it? I said, no. She said, why? I said, because real men don't eat quiche. And my mom looked at me like, are you an idiot? She said, what are you talking about? I said, one of Pasha's old boyfriends, he told me real men do not eat quiche. And she told me something that just absolutely blew me away. She looked at me and she says, son, your dad eats quiche. And he's a real man. I was like, yeah, he is. She said, just try it. And I did. And I got to tell you, I am really bitter at the guy who kept me from eating quiche all those years. Because I discovered there was something missing. But I didn't realize it was missing because I didn't give it a chance. I didn't taste it. Now let's tie this into something spiritual. Psalm 34 verse 8. Are you ready for this? Listen to it. Taste and see that the Lord is what? Good. Good. Taste it. Try it. Sometimes people look at the church and they look at Christianity and they say, I'd never do anything like that. I don't want to have anything to do with that. I mean, if the other people do, that's great. That's fine. But you know, that stuff is not for me. I mean, the preacher, all they care about is your money and the people. They're just a bunch of hypocrites. And there's all these rules. I mean, that's great if other people, want to do that, but this is not for me. But have you tasted it? You see, you don't know that you're missing something. Because so oftentimes the world puts these things out in front of us and we accept these things as true. And this is going to satisfy me, this is going to fulfill me, this is going to be great. But in reality, it's just a cheap imitation of what we're really meant to find in God. He's who we were created for. And that's all Solomon is really doing with the book of Ecclesiastes. He's trying to whet our appetite for this. He's trying to whet our appetite for, what really matters. And that's why we're searching. And listen, here's the thing. Keep searching. Some of you realize, man, something is missing in my life. Will you just keep looking? You keep searching. Going back to that old DVD player. The kids and I, we looked and we looked and we looked for that remote control. And we couldn't find it. Now, we found all kinds of things that had been missing. I mean, it was amazing what you find when you're looking for other things, but we couldn't find the remote. And finally, one of the kids said what I was already thinking. They said, we're never going to find that remote. I said, I think you're right. And so the kids and I, we stopped looking. Don't stop looking. Keep searching. Listen, you want to know why you have these feelings that something's missing in your life? Listen to Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11. God has set eternity where, church? In the hearts of man. In other words, God has made us with this inner desire for Him that cannot be satisfied with anything in this world. Do you hear me? But so oftentimes, by looking for that satisfaction in other places, we get discouraged and it's just like, well, I'm never going to find it. I'm just going to throw in the towel. I'm just going to give up. And Solomon says, don't give up. Keep searching. Verse 14, and I'm going to have to move here, is really the key verse for this chapter. This is what Solomon says, I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Now, there are some phrases in this passage that I want us to kind of dissect. And I want us to look at, and you might want to underline these in your Bible. The first one is that phrase, under the sun. That's mentioned some 29 times in the book of Ecclesiastes if you decide to read it. For some of you see that phrase and it's like, man, what does he mean? I've searched under the sun. Well, he's not talking about heavenly things. That's not where his search was. This was not a spiritual search. This was under the sun. This was an earthly search. This was a solely humanistic search. And this is his conclusion. Meaningless. That word appears some 35 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. And this is Solomon's feelings as he concludes each of these different paths that he goes down. He says it's meaningless. And he goes on to say, it's like chasing after the wind. That phrase is used some 9 times. And Solomon, I think, uses this phrase to really show us the frustration of what he's going through. Can you catch the wind? Can anybody catch the wind? No way. And that's what he's saying. When you go down all these different paths looking for satisfaction, looking for fulfillment, it's like chasing the wind. You're chasing and chasing and chasing, and you just can't get it. Or how many of you have ever seen a dog trying to get to its tail, and it can't? It's just going in circles, right? That'd be a better illustration for us today. But he gives us a couple of other illustrations, really pictures for us to think about. Look at verse 15 to show his frustration. He says, what is twisted cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. These are some really cool word pictures here because I think we can relate to some of these through other things. How many of you like to put up Christmas lights? Anybody? Anybody? Okay, some of you like to put up Christmas lights. Some of you are just Scrooges. Well, what's up with that? Come on. But anyway, how many of you understand what it's like? You decide today's the day. I'm excited to put up your lights. And man, you open up that box and all your Christmas lights are in a big knot. And you start, man, you're trying to untangle this mess. But as Solomon says, you can't untangle what's tangled. And he's saying to you and me, that's the way life is. We search, but we just can't find it. In fact, he goes on to say what's lacking cannot be counted. How many of you like to put together puzzles? Anybody raise a hand on this? Okay, a couple of you, good. How many of you have ever gotten down to the very last piece? And I mean, this is the key piece in the puzzle. It shows the picture. You get down to that last piece and it is missing. Yeah, you experience that. What do? Man, you get on the floor, you're like, what in this world? Where could this piece go? You know, and you go to the game closet and you're looking in there and you're looking at other puzzles trying to find this piece and you can't find it. And that's what Solomon is saying. Life is like when we're trying to find what we're missing under the sun. When we're looking for that satisfaction under the sun, we're trying to find a piece that, guess what? It's just not there. And so Solomon is speaking about this frustration. Every single day, we're bombarded with advertisements. They say that through the internet, the radio, cell phones, television, the average person sees over 4,000 advertisements a day. Billboards, whatever. Over 4,000. And the theme of these billboards and all these advertisements is this: to get you to realize that you're missing out on something. How many of you know what this is, Snuggie? I will never forget when they first came out with the Snuggie commercial. My family and myself, we thought it was hilarious. And just so happens that Christmas, Julie's father is sitting there. We're all gathered around. He opens up his first gift, and guess what it is? A Snuggie. And man, we busted out laughing, and what made it even funnier is he looked at us and he says, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And so from then on, man, me and especially my daughter Lena, this is a running joke in our house. We thought this was so funny. But then Lena and I, we started seeing the commercials and we started really thinking about this. This is genius. I mean, it's a blanket with sleeves, right? I mean, how many of you have been sitting on the couch, it's a cold day, and you forgot something back in the kitchen, you got to get up and get it, well, you don't want to put down your blanket, well, guess what? You don't have to with a Snuggie. You just get up and you walk, you're carrying your blanket with you. And so now every time Lena and I go into Walmart, we're like, there's the Snuggies. That's all I want for Christmas, man. I want a Snuggie. Give me the Alabama Snuggie, you know. And we're just sitting there and we're laughing about it. And we now, both of us want a Snuggie. But let me tell you what I guarantee you will happen in time. Lena and I will probably get to the point where we'll say, you know what that is? That's just a backward robe. Why'd I ask for that for Christmas? I mean, all I had to do is get my robe and just put my hands through the front and walk around with that. But the point is this, that's how we are. We think that this is going to satisfy and that's going to satisfy, and we keep searching, but the search continues. Because none of these things under the sun satisfy. I've lived this out in my life. And I tell you, I'm gaining some wisdom in some of these areas. Just like when I was, Julie and I we'd been married a couple of years, and I decided, Julie, I need a motorcycle. And I tried to convince, I said, listen, I don't ever ask for anything. Everything I do is for the family, and think about the ministry I could start with this, a motorcycle ministry. And Julie just rolled her eyes and said, look, if you want a motorcycle, just get it. So I went out and I bought a motorcycle. A little over a year later, I sold the motorcycle. Wasn't as exciting anymore. I'll never forget, we moved to Winter Haven. There was a place that we went to for 13 years, once a year, called Manny's. Favorite place to eat. We moved to Winter Haven. Kids were going to eat at Manny's every night. Can you believe this? We live by Manny's. We ate there for the first couple of weeks, and then after that I was like, I don't want to see Manny's anymore. Disney. We get to Winter Haven, we're like, hey man, we get Disney. We've been going the last 13 years. Disney's big for us. We get Disney passes, man. I'd get off work, we'd go to Disney. And after, a couple of weeks, guess what my kids said? My kids looked at me and they said, Dad, we have to go to Disney today? I look at my kids, I'm like, do you realize that most kids never even get to experience it? You can go anytime. Dad, we're sick of it. And you begin to see there's nothing under the sun that satisfies. Tom Brady, quarterback for the Patriots, said a couple of years ago, why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still feel like there's something greater out there for me? I think, man, there's got to be more than this. This isn't what it's all cracked up to be. Eddie Murphy, famous actor. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't feel like something is missing in their life, no matter how much money you make, how many cars or houses you have. Brad Pitt, ladies, once said, man, I know all these things are supposed to seem important to us, the cars, the condo, our version of success, but if you ask me, I say toss all this. We've got to find something else. I'm the guy who has everything. I'm sitting in it, and I am telling you, this isn't it. Wow. And that's what Solomon's saying. I went down all those paths. I've done it for you. And I'm telling you, this isn't it. The kids and I, we stopped looking for the remote. But my wife decided I'm not done with the search. She goes over to the couch, instead of looking under and behind like we had already done, she decides to look in the couch. And she's just blindly scooping her hand through the couch, and she's pulling out all kind of things, action figures, money. And then finally she finds what we were looking for. She finds the remote. And man, we were so excited. And I tell you that to tell you this. You know what? Every single day there are people who find what they're really looking for. Every single day across this globe there are people who find Jesus Christ. Who find God. And when they finally find God, they begin to realize this is it. This is what I've been missing in my life. And even Solomon, at the end of his search, if you look at chapter 12, verse 13, this is what he says. Here's the conclusion of the matter. In other words, this is what really matters in life. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. In other words, Solomon says that's what we were created for. That's what we were made for. For God, to have a relationship with Him and serve Him. And man, when we do that, life gets a lot sweeter. Augustine prayed over 1,500 years ago, our hearts are restless until they find rest in You. In other words, God is the missing piece. I want to close out with this scripture. The lesson's yours. Going over a little bit this morning, but I hope this lesson has been impactful today. 1 John chapter 5, verse 12, He who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son of God does not have life. Let me ask you this morning, what are you searching for? What are you searching for? And I guarantee you, if that search is outside of a search for God, if it's anything under heaven, it might find you some temporary happiness, but let me tell you, it's not going to be long term. And so I would say for those of you who are searching today, if you want to be truly happy, if you want to experience joy in your life, come to Jesus. Give your life to Him. He died for you. I'd love to tell you more about Him. You just tell me when and where, and we'll sit down and I will tell you about Jesus and what He can do for you. But then there may also be some here today who you just, maybe your thought is, I just need prayers. And maybe the prayers are, hey, God, help me to refocus on what's really important, because I have been going so fast for so long, chasing after so many things that I've got distracted from what's really important, and that's You. And so today, whatever the case may be, won't you stand as we sing?